What's going on, guys? This is Aaron from Departures Capital, and we're here with John Feneck, CEO of Feneck Consulting and Portfolio Manager in the mining sector. It's a pleasure to have you back on, John. We've had you on many times, and I'm excited to be chatting about gold and silver mining stocks and many other things. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Aaron.
Yes. So, last time we spoke, we were chatting about the current state of the markets. Can you tell us a bit more about what's been going on over the last few months, and where do we go from here?
Yeah, sure. So our last interview was around Memorial Day, the U.S., and we've seen a rush and we've seen very strong U.S. economic data since then. The probability of the July 26th Fed meeting going from a 40% probability of a hike all the way to 92% now. That would be a quarter point hike coming up July 26th. So, I think the markets are kind of treading water here, the broad market that is, waiting for a couple of things. I would argue, the press conference on July 26th to see if Powell says anything new. That's always important.
Mm-hmm.
But also in August, we've got, remember, Jackson Hole, Wyoming has its symposium every year. That definitely moves markets because interviews with voting members, right? It's not just Powell speaking, it's all of the voting members, trying to talk up their, story, and that definitely moves markets. So I would say that's important too to watch, to see if there's any change there. Catches people by surprise a lot of times because it's late summer.
So, economic data has been coming in stronger than we expected over the last few months. Looks like the Fed is set to continue to raise rates. When are they going to stop this? I mean, I'm in the camp of I want rates to stop because I feel like it'll be a much more friendly environment, especially for the small cap sector. Where do we go from here? How's the situation looking for gold?
Yeah, so we've been on Kitco and other bigger shows since March of last year and June of last year, talking up this idea that the Fed would be hawkish for longer than people wanted, right? It's not because I want to see that, it's because that's what I see. It's like, I am perfectly positioned for a hike, a cut, right? But the Fed just got done saying in June not a single voting member is talking about a cut this year. So if you want to be a contrarian and say, I think that's not true, that's great. That's one thesis, right? Our thesis is we're listening very closely to what the Fed is saying. The Fed is telling you 2 more rate hikes this year. They're telling you we're not interested in cutting rates. That's just as of today, right here in July. That could change next month, right? But you have to respect that the environment that we're in is sort of meeting to meeting, right? Because we saw a huge run up since March of last year in rates, and now we're seeing this kind of, do we pause or do we raise 25 bips probably for the next couple of meetings, and then at some point, hopefully sooner than later, we're going to get some cuts, right? But I don't think it's going to come as soon as many of my peers think.
So maybe sometime next year, or not this year, eh?
Definitely next year, but look, if we have something happen with the BRICS meeting coming up, I think that's an important one for investors to watch, because BRICS stands for India, China, and South Africa, and they're going to have a huge meeting August 22nd discussing an alternative currency perhaps that would compete with the US dollar. And if that happens, I think it's going to be backed by commodities like gold, like oil, et cetera, and wake people up that, these countries are serious about competing with the US dollar. And that is going to be very dollar negative, I think, which would drive more interest into the mining and metal sector, which would be great.
Definitely enough of these fiat currencies, right? So do you have any updates on some of the names that, you've recently mentioned on the channel?
Yeah. So we mentioned Stillwater, and that is PGE in Canada, PGEZF in the States. We had talked for, I don't know, 6 months that, I've invested in that part of Montana for 10 years now. First with Stillwater, which was the old SWC. Then that got sold to Sibanye, which is SBSW. Stillwater Critical is literally attached to Sibanye's rocks. So when you look at that deposit, it is massive. and it is rich in things like nickel, palladium, platinum, etc. So we always like a 12-cent junior stock, where I mentioned it on your program last time, I think 0.122. It ran after some really positive news in June to 0.173, and that news was a 9.9% investment from commodity giant Glencore.
Hmm.
So when you see Glencore, invest in anything, that's something to pay attention to. I can tell you there's probably more than one party interested in that kind of an investment, but getting Glencore on board is huge for that company, I think, longer term. And that does cash them up, right, for the rest of the year. They don't need to do a raise. I think the stock was trading like it needed to raise money, and now for some reason it's barely up from that news. I mean,
Mhm.
it's faded back down to 0.145 US here. So I mean, we're all over it here. We're on the bid every single day. Um, Another one that you met back in, I guess, January was Forum Energy Metals, and that really had a big seller this week. I talked to the CEO. There was no negative news out there, so we bought more of that this week under 5 cents US, and that ticker is FDCFF. I think if you look at their recent news, Aaron, since you and I met with them in January, they came out and did a financing, raised about 2 million Canadian, and they got a $3 million Canadian infusion from an outside investor, and one person, one entity, that is, which is always good. So you're
Mhm.
looking at another cashed up junior there that can drill all summer, and that's the kind of stuff that generates interest, right? You hit a couple holes there, and the stock has the potential to double here from 4.5 cents US, in my opinion. Remember, on the 3-year chart, that hit 47 cents. So again, down 90% from the high. It's just insane that some of these juniors are getting sold off to the point of where the CEOs and different management entities are just scratching their head. Um, Another one that got really bombed out this week, that I mentioned on your program last time, I think around 7 cents US, traded down to 0.053 today. We bought some at 0.0541, and that's Cartier. It's ECRFF. Again, since I was on your program in June, they talked about a new zone that they discovered. So how is that negative? Like, when you're expanding the resource, that's a positive thing, but yet the stock is down exponentially since that news item, which brought it from 7 back to 11, and then is now down to 5.5 or lower. It's insane. So this is why we coach people on setting buy orders away from the action, along with an order closer to the action, right? So
Mhm.
if you really want some shares, sure, go with 1/100th of a penny above the current bid. If the bid's 7 cents, buy it at 0.701. But you also have an order like I did today down at 5.5, right? So it's like way away from the action, but somehow we got filled on a market sell order. So, that's how you get a better blended experience, which we can talk about later in the show. Um, the only other thing I wanted to mention on stuff that I mentioned last time was SilverX, AGXPF. They're very close to closing their financing, which would cash them up for the rest of the year as well. I think they've grown production very nicely in Peru, and plan on seeing them at Beaver Creek in September.
Definitely. So, what are some of the names that you're watching right now when it comes to the precious metal mining stocks, both large cap and small cap?
Okay. So we'll do the small cap first. We mentioned one other time on your show this year, Vortex, which is VMSSF. We like the June 28th news where they're bringing on a third project, right? So the things we've talked on your program a lot of times is, I'm not the type of investor that really enjoys one project companies, right?
Mhm.
Alexco comes to mind, AXU, that had real problems in the Yukon, water problems, and just ended up selling to heck for pennies in the dollar.
Mhm.
When you don't have somewhere to pivot, right, that's a problem to me. Now, bringing on a third project further de-risks the company, and that project is in Chile, and it's copper rich, and I think it's an 80% interest, if I remember correctly. So we've seen, over the last 3 weeks, Aaron, that stock make, some higher lows, and we like that technically. It's trading right now at 0.108 US. So I think it's got upside potential here, probably another 40 to 50% within the next, 3 to 6 months. It seems to be doing better volume, and the bid ask spread is compressed a bit. We also just started this new company, First Tellurium, which is FSTTF. We like, I'm speaking at Beaver Creek, by the way, September 12th on energy transition and battery metals. As you know, I've talked a lot about that on your show, and I think that's one of the things that makes us different than some of our competitors that just focus on gold and silver. So, this is a company that's rich in tungsten, tellurium, moly, bismuth, things that are not necessarily on front of mind of the average investor. But when you look at the chart, there's a lot of value here at 10 cents US because the stock was much higher. It's traded pretty well for a junior. They just engaged a marketing company here this week in the States. They also have had really regular news, which we look for in a junior, right? They're not hiding anything. They're putting out all the news they can. So, the CEO Ty strikes me as a very upfront and here's the type of person that is showing his hand, right? Which you like to see as an investor, rather than someone who's holding things back and putting out news every month or two, and just kind of investors in this kind of a market, I feel, will sell a stock when the price is declining, right? If there's not regular news, there's not updates. The option for them is usually, well, I can probably contact the company, but maybe I'll just sell, right? So I like hands-on CEOs like him that are trying to be out there for shareholders in a difficult time for mining. Just looking at my notes real quick. So yeah, three others I'll mention that we are looking at right now. Let's see, Copper Lake is one. I just talked to the company a week ago. They have put out some news in April and May. The ticker is WTCZF, and it was sort of yawned at. As you know, in the junior mining space, you need to have bigger drill holes to follow up success, right? So they had some success at Marshall Lake last year. The stock went from 3 cents to 16 cents US. It's trading at 3 cents now as we speak. It's literally round trip that gain. So yeah, if you bought at 16 or 15, you're not a happy camper. But again, we bought it a penny and a half in November of 2020, right? So we started this company real low. We bought on the way up. We sold some between 13 and 16 in full disclosure. And then we basically bought more here at 3 cents. So our blended experience in this stock has been fantastic. I think there's going to be some good, things coming out of that stock. I saw them present at PDAC in March. They did an offsite thing. Really impressive list of geos involved in that, both on the board formally as well as just investors. Also, I would mention U.S. Gold is one that we restarted around $4. The ticker is USAU. It hit 411, I think, this week. It hit 404 the previous week. So like we talked about with Vortex, making a series of higher lows very quietly, kind of bottomed around that $4 level. And now it's finding a little bit more support above that. I think it closed around 430 today. I'd have to double check, but it's a NASDAQ listed stock in the US, right? So their projects are primarily Nevada and Wyoming. They're going to get permits, I think, for Wyoming as early as December, maybe January. So you're buying a stock here and waiting 5 or 6 months. I mean, the problem, Aaron, with a lot of investors is they don't even wait 6 months anymore. They just want an immediate payday because they're coming to us from AI or Bitcoin or some other ridiculous sector that does have great returns. No argument there. But this is a different sector, right? You have to exercise some patience. And I get it. It's been very just a long haul here from summer of 2020. It's been 3 years. So, this has been more of a downturn than I have expected, than many have expected. But you have to always go back, as we talked about before, go back to the thesis of the company. Is this company going to get its permits? Call them up and ask them. George B is very accessible. I think they've put out regular news about their meetings with government and ranchers and everything else in Wyoming. I think Wyoming is a very supportive state quietly. They want this mine built. So I think Copper King, which is now called CK, is going to get built. I visited it 2 summers ago, and we've been buyers here in the 350 to 4 range heavily to add to our position. The last one I'll mention is Treasury Metals, which we talked about once on your show. TSRMF is the ticker. I'm interviewing the CEO for the first time in July on my YouTube channel, which is the Feneck Commodities report. So if you're interested, that's happening July 19th, if you're listening and want to learn a little bit more about the stock. But what attracts me to Treasury is the same thing that attracted me to Cartier. They've got 2.9 million ounces in the right categories of gold. They've got a complex. It's not just one site, right? They're in Canada, which is a good jurisdiction. Like so many juniors, they're getting down ticked and heavily shorted, naked shorted, I believe. And about the company level, I think, at 18 cents US right now, if you look at the chart, it's an advanced stage company, right? It's like you're getting a gold. If you believe in gold, buy something like this that's going to be an advanced stage project with nearly 3 million ounces of gold at a reasonable AISC. I'd have to double check, but I think their AISC is around 10.50 an ounce, maybe slightly lower. So this is a project that have legs at much lower gold project prices.
For sure. So, aside from gold and silver, are there any other commodities that you're bullish on right now, and why?
Yeah. If you look at our thesis, which was a recession by this summer, we said that publicly a couple of times, and we're wrong, right? I mean, we're not seeing a recession right now. You saw that non-farm payrolls read today. Heavy, job growth in things like construction, heavy job growth in travel and leisure. Are those numbers real? I don't know. I can just say that that's what you would hope to see go flat or down if we're entering a recession, right? Looking at non-farm payrolls and the ADP numbers are important to give you some type of foreshadowing, if you will, of like, is this or GDP dropping, right? We saw the opposite. GDP on June 29th was a 2% read versus a 1.3% estimate. That's not going the right way if you're thinking recession tomorrow. So we did our thesis, to say probably going to be January or sometime in Q1 that you start to see more recessionary fears pick up. Now, that could change if we see the BRICS meeting really cause havoc next month. I just don't know. No one knows, right? But it feels to me like money managers are continuing to grab at whatever they can. That is underscored by the fact that the S&P 500 right now is so heavily weighted in technology. It's insane. I can only remember something like this, Aaron, in 1999 or 2000. 26.1% of the SPY as we sit here right now is in tech. That means the top 10 holdings. That's not the index with 500 names. That's just the top 10 is 26% tech. So we just wrote about this in our newsletter literally this week. We said there's two camps forming, one that's rational and one that's, hey, I'm going to buy everything I can in tech and AI and ride that wave. Good for you. That's a way to play it. We're just not interested at these prices because the downside risk is so huge. I think if you're doing that, the best thing to do is pull up 15 and 20 year charts on what you're trading, right? The downside is huge. It's not small. We'd much rather buy some things that, getting back to your point earlier, I didn't get to the bigger names. Buy an AEM, right? An Agnico, buy a Newmont NEM. These things have dividends. They're real companies. They're not going out of business. It's like, that's where people are going to be putting their money. I think if we were fast forward to this time next year, more money will be flowing into our sector in names like that because they're real names with some type of income. And why buy something that just has a 50 multiple, right?
Couldn't agree more. So do you have any names in the market that you would like to revisit before we wrap this up?
No, I think we've done a good job of kind of going through a lot of things. You can check out our website. We lowered our prices here in June just to try to reflect the fact that the mining and metal sector has had a rough stretch here. I'm always willing to work with some of your listeners on their budgets. So, I've had people come to me that were hurricane victims or were sick or whatever, right? I'm willing to work with people on pricing because this is the time, as you and I were just talking about off camera, to be putting some bids out there, right? Like, it's been a 3-year downturn. We're getting close to an oversold condition. We want to try to work with as many retail people as we can to try to help them out and, coach them a little bit on, if you bought something high, it's okay. We all make mistakes on an entry point, me included. You have to buy multiple times if you have conviction in a name to get a good blended price.
Definitely couldn't agree more. Well, thanks for all those updates, John. It's always a pleasure to have you. And we'll be having you back on maybe late August.
Sounds great.
If you like these videos, kindly hit that subscribe button and the bell for notifications. Drop us a comment down below. We'd love to hear from you. And finally, always remember, Departures Capital is for information, education, and entertainment purposes only. Don't buy or sell a stock because you heard it on here. Buy or sell a stock because you've done your research, you've done your thorough due diligence, and you're making your own personal investment decisions for yourself. This video is not financial advice. Furthermore, this video may or may not have been sponsored by the companies that we've profiled within this video, and we may or may not own shares of any of the profiled companies in this video. If you want to know the full disclosure details, check the description down below along with thoroughly reading our disclaimer. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I look forward to seeing you in our next video.